Welcome to Watchtower History. The Abrams machine is claimed by Goodrich in his book Demonology in the Watchtower as being a type of occult machine or an auto-writing machine. In the Billings Gazette, September 29th, 1922, is an article, "Writing Will Diagnose Ills," doctor claims. Diagnosis of disease through study of the handwriting of the sufferer is a new theory of therapeutics propounded before the American Association of Medical Physical Research, in session here by Dr. Albert Abrams of San Francisco, discoverer of the principle of determining paternity through blood tests. Not only can disease be diagnosed from handwriting, but the sex of the writer can be determined, Dr. Abrams said. "I know it sounds grotesque," he said, "but I have done it, and my students have done it. There is nothing incredible about it when one understands the electronic theory. All life is electronic energy. When one writes, the electronic energy is transferred indelibly to the paper, and the electronic energy can be diagnosed. Disease," he said, "is nothing more than the displacement of electrons from their normal positions, electrons gone wrong." The Sacramento Bee, September 26, 1922, has an article, "Discordant Waves of Blood Cause of Stomach Ache." Vibrations of the stomach, not in harmony with the rest of the body, cause the ache. This is according to Dr. Albert Abrams of San Francisco, who spoke before the American Association of Medical Physical Research. Each drop of blood has its own vibration, and discordant waves are felt as body disorders. Dr. Abrams contended paternity can be established by comparison of the vibrations of father and child. This is a new one. The Sumter Daily item has another one about this American Association of Medical Physical Research and a Dr. William Held of Chicago who startled them with a new theory of prolonging life. He maintains that glands are coated with a poison called cholin, and that a new serum, which he calls cholin splitter, made from the glands of steers, is injected. It will turn the trick, so to speak. One can live to 150, he says. Dr. Held did not live that long. September 29th, 1926, the Evening Tribune also has another article about this American Medical Association. There are approximately 5 million goiter sufferers in the United States, with the bulk of them in the so-called goiter belt of the Great Lakes area. Dr. Z.I. Baldwin of Kalamazoo, Michigan, today told the section on physiotherapy of the 17th Annual Convention of the American Association for Medical Physical Research here at the Morrison Hotel. Contrary to the general belief, the average goiter is not an operative case calling for surgical attention, Dr. Baldwin declared. Fully 75% of the cases are susceptible to treatment by correction of the eyes, he asserted. There's a distinct relation between the eye centers and the thyroid gland and its two near and associated glands, the pituitary and adrenal glands, Dr. Baldwin declared. Eye strain, said the speaker, exerts a strong influence on the thyroid and associated glands and causes conditions which result in goiter, he said. Classes for what is known as eye repression can bring about a cure in a great bulk of such cases, he said. Diseases which a few years ago were held as purely surgical cases are now being cured by physical and electrotherapy, such as mechanical exercising apparatus and electrical treatments like the ultraviolet ray and diathermy. Dr. Chauncey L. Barber, Lansing, Michigan, told the convention. Impulse was given to these mediums of treatment after the World War, when some 85% of the disabled American war veterans were redeemed by physical and electrotherapeutics after other means had failed, Dr. Barber declared. This is an example of the use of Dr. Abrams' machine. But when looking up the device in every publication that we could find, newspaper articles, in the Watchtower itself or Golden Age, everywhere, at the time that Watchtower was using this device, it was used as a chiropractic cure, a cure for anything. As we've been showing, the Watchtower and the Golden Age were very much into these kind of quack medical cures. And a lot of these coming from anti-Semitic sources. In the court case of Charles Taze Russell against the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, it mentions that they had stock in Bernard McFadden's Physical Culture restaurant. This machine, proposed by Dr. Abrams, he was the president and founder of that so-called medical association that Watchtower was following. That entire supposed medical association was literally based on quack science and started by a quack. And Abrams, before he died, even admitted that the machine didn't do anything. And he died just a few short years later.
And once again, Watchtower is somehow intertwined with such. I give him credit. Rutherford was in the middle of everything. Ford, Bryan, McFadden, he got himself in everything.
And this was that supposed medical association that was called out for anti-Semitism, just like McFadden. And this was that group that labeled Fishbein, the head of the actual American Medical Association, the type of Jew that crucified Christ. Very anti-Semitic terms and phrases.
Which is the whole point of this section of the discussion, to tie it in. It's just not just his personal ideas against the Jew. It's how he got his ideas and how far-fetched and how far out these tendrils just expanded outside that he just brought into his organization. Demon-possessed people. That's the start of it.
And so this machine was an electrical machine that he built, which he thought would help to restore health. The idea was that it would vibrate disease to death. There's an article in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, March 23rd, 1923, to shake disease germs to death. Rate of vibrations of affected cells as determined by electronic reaction may be used first to diagnose and then to cure. They had conventions which demonstrated this machine, which McFadden ended up being a part of later on, and even William Jennings Bryan was giving lectures at their conferences. For some time, this was in a lot of the newspapers. Here in the Tampa Daily Times, Bauman tests new discovery, says Abrams' method may be a boon to mankind. And of course, headlines like this would catch the eye of various Watchtower readers, as well as Clayton Woodworth and Joseph Rutherford, who were following these type of quack medical treatments. Disease cures are affected by vibrations. San Francisco doctor said to have accompanied wonders with machines. Revolution in healing. Methods of Dr. Adler Abrams are hailed by British medical scientists. Huge crowd welcomes Dr. Abrams. Revolutionary medical scientist will carry fight to the people. Is still working on electronic theory despite scoffers. People seeking Dr. Abrams from all corners of the globe. This association and the chiropractors that were using these electroradiometry machines had their own periodical, the Physical Clinical Medicine magazine, with Albert Abrams machines and books sold through the periodical. It was also called the oscilloclast. It says mysterious machine for curing disease. You could see some advertisement on this slide. Shake disease germs to death. Abrams oscilloclast, including Abrams blood test. Treatments for cancer, syphilis, tuberculosis, goiter, and other chronic affections. In this letter to the editor on screen here, it says that the greatest living American is Dr. Albert Abrams of San Francisco, California. He has taken the scientific fact that all matter in the universe has a vibratory rate of electrons of which it is composed. Applying the vibratory theory to disease of the human, he has established that each disease has a constant vibratory rate in the blood of diseased persons. He has given as a method of diagnosing disease with mathematical accuracy, measuring the amount of disease, and has invented the oscilloclast, which will destroy the disease. Among the diseases he can destroy are cancer and tuberculosis. His discovery, when perfected and accepted by the human race, will free it from disease, clean up our insane asylums and penitentiaries. I do not expect you to publish this letter, as it would be advertising matter for me. I am, however, mailing you a pamphlet presenting the subject to you in a well-written manner. So this letter to the editor was means by which they were trying to sell or lease out this machine. Electricity and love, broadcasting the emotions. Doctor's claims. Miracle Man who kills germs advertises it as being used in the treatment of all disease conditions. It makes it possible to correctly diagnose every disease of the human body. Prior to this discovery, the diagnosis of the average physician was incorrect in upwards of 60%. Now, when anyone is ill, Dr. Abrams' method of diagnosis reveals the true cause of the disease, thus making it possible to prescribe the most effective treatment. But diagnosis is not all. Dr. Abrams has given the medical world a treatment that has proven to be the most natural and scientific method of all time. It consists of measuring the resistance of disease by means of an instrument and having learned what causes the lowered resistance. He proceeds with the oscilloclast to change the vibratory rate of the diseased tissue so that a natural healing process takes place and nature gradually restores health. Some marvelous cures have been brought about where all other methods of treatment have failed. We diagnose and treat all diseases as directed by Dr. Albert Abrams of San Francisco. If you lack ambition or do not have your old-time energy or are not ailing from a trouble that has not been corrected, have an Abrams blood test made from a drop of your blood. So very, very interesting thing. And of course, Abrams' machine didn't work, and Abrams himself died. It says, inventor famous blood test dead. Dr. Abrams' theories attracted much attention in the United States. He even thought he could detect feelings through vibrations. Another article has magic box of Dr. Abrams has something new. Another front page story. Local specialist explains new method of treating disease. Dr. D.D. Boyer goes east to take up Abrams' method of diagnosis. Marvelous results are obtained. Oscilloclast here, pioneer in the South. And you can see a picture of the machine and, of course, another depiction, another photograph of the machine being used. Not all the newspapers or doctors or scientists fell for Abrams' quack medical device. You can see an article here. Dr. Hayward sued by J.H. Robinette. Bill and Chancery charges that Abrams' treatment of disease is fake. The Abrams method of diagnosis and treatment involves the use of a machine known as the oscilloclast, which is the invention of Dr. Abrams, California physician, whose blood tests have attracted nationwide attention. Through a system of electronic reflexes, Dr. Abrams claims to be able to detect the presence of disease by examination of a drop of the patient's blood, independent of any other examination. He also says that his blood tests will reveal the sex and race of the subject. Each disease, according to the Abrams theory, has a certain vibratory rate, which the oscilloclast records in diagnosis, and in treatment the machine throws off electric energy at a corresponding rate, thus effecting the alleged cure. Although Dr. Abrams has been signally honored by a certain group of the members of his profession, physicians of the regular school have been almost unanimous in denouncing his methods as either stupidly childish or viciously fraudulent. In the book Life in the Balance, Emergency Medicine and the Quest to Reverse Sudden Death by Dr. Mickey Eisenberg, PhD, it talks about Abrams' Ohm cocktail. Perhaps the most successful charlatan to use electricity for medical treatment, at least from the viewpoint of amassing wealth, was Dr. Albert Abrams. When he died, the American Medical Association's obituary gave him the dubious honor of being the dean of the 20th century's charlatans. It says that Abrams was a vice president of the California State Medical Society in 1889 and president of the San Francisco Society in 1893. He wrote profusely on medical topics, and in 1910 published a 1,000-page mainstream book titled Diagnostic Therapeutics. 6 years later, he was in somewhat less traditional territory. None of Abrams' writings reveal why he departed from standard medical practice. Whatever the reason, his new career led him down the murky path of pseudoscience and exploitation. Abrams' quack theory, announced in a 1916 book, New Concepts on Diagnosis and Treatment, rested on the belief that all disease was a result of disharmony in the body's electrical oscillations. He believed that each disease had its own characteristic pattern of oscillations. Electrons, not cells, form the basis of life and disease. Abrams claimed the ability to both diagnose and treat. As this book continues, a couple pages later, it says that newspapers love to report the fraud for what it was. The Dearborn Independent, Henry Ford's paper, at least this one they got right, noted on May 19, 1923, various reports have appeared from time to time in the Journal of American Medical Association of the results furnished to doctors when they sent samples of blood to Abrams' disciples for diagnosis. One guinea pig was found to have congenital syphilis, and a sheep was found to be suffering from gonorrhea. But these animals were lucky compared to the rooster, who was found to be suffering from congenital syphilis, gonorrhea, carcinoma, sarcoma, epithelioma, chronic malaria, and diabetes. Scientific condemnations began to mount. Nobel laureate Robert A. Millikan characterized the machine as something a 10-year-old boy who knew little about electricity who would construct to fool an 8-year-old who knew nothing. Professional opinion alone could not stem the public's interest. It wasn't until Abrams' unexpected death from pneumonia on January 3rd, 1924, at the age of 61, that the ardor for his theories began to cool. Pneumonia was one of the diseases which the Oscilloclast was supposed to treat. Abrams died 2 days before he was scheduled to give testimony at a fraud trial in Arkansas involving one of his practitioners who was caught making a diagnosis from chicken blood. The San Francisco Examiner ran a front-page obituary and wrote, "Worry over attacks launched on his theories in all parts of the civilized world by the medical profession led to a breakdown in his health." At his death, Abrams had amassed a fortune valued at $2 to $5 million. The final irony is that Abrams earmarked his estate for a school of electronic medicine. His relatives contested the will, and the school was never started. There are other famous people who liked Dr. Abrams and his machine, even Upton Sinclair, who wrote The Jungle about the meatpacking factories, has a book, The Book of Life, Mind and Body, and he was into these quack medical science things, and he tried to defend Dr. Abrams. He says British scientists were not content to follow the lead of Americans and call Abrams a charlatan without studying him. Following the advice of Sir James Barr, late president of the British Medical Society, a committee was formed to make thorough tests under the chairmanship of Sir Thomas Horter, physician to the Prince of Wales. This committee employed physicists, and they set out to settle one question: whether or not there is any such thing as the electronic reactions of Abrams. A physician of Glasgow, Dr. Boyd, using a cage made of copper screening to exclude radio vibrations, was able to make distinction between two specimens through a series of 30 successive tests. The committee in its report centers upon one question. Does anything happen? And it makes the unqualified assertion, something does happen. Abrams had not been content with diagnosis. He had sought for cure. He had tested many forms of energy to find one that would cancel the disease reactions of the body of the subject. He found what he sought in a blocked electrical circuit. He constructed a machine which he called the oscilloclast, and it claimed to cure disease with it. And I have talked with hundreds of patients who endorse his claim. The Appeal to Reason paper also promoted Dr. Abrams' machine based on the recommendation of Upton Sinclair. If you remember, we talked about the Fool Killer in our Roadmap series. James Larkin Pearson is the poet laureate of North Carolina, and he was a fan of both Rutherford and Henry Ford and those general ideas. Even he mentions in his article, another new thing under the sun, and the pillboxes and the bottles of belly wash can now go to thunder and stay there. Electricity will tell you what's the matter and cure you while you wait. And the only way anybody can die will be to get so tickled over their good health that they will laugh themselves to death. The new method is called the electronic reactions of Abrams, and it seems to be a sort of double and twisted twin cousin to the radio telephone. It doesn't seem a bit more strange or unreasonable than the radio. And if one is true, the other may be. With my own ears, I've heard music and talking which came 800 miles through the naked air. I know that is a fact. And yet, just a few years ago, that would have been a miracle. Anything that we thought couldn't be done is a miracle, until it happens often enough to make it common. And then we wonder why it used to seem so strange. Same way with Dr. Abrams and his new method of cheating the grave. It's so strange now that we can't conceive of the possibility of its being true. But it may be true after all. I sort of think it is, but I'm not going to be too sure about it until I see further. In the book Demonism and the Watchtower by Roy Goodrich, he makes the suggestion that Dr. Abrams' machine is like a Ouija board or an automatic writer. He says, the above heading, What is ERA, is the caption of a 6-page article which the Golden Age requested Dr. May J. work to write for its columns in reply to the 8-page article on Ouija boards, large and small, by Roy D. Goodrich. The article states that she was sent to California to learn the Abrams technique, presumably on the word of Judge Rutherford, in December 1922. During the years that intervened, Dr. Work was physician to the Bethel family. This proves that this theory of quacks was practiced in and on the Bethel family from 1922 to 1930 at least, which, with the approval of Judge Rutherford, who was in absolute control of the Bethel. So Goodrich doesn't really know. He's making a conclusion on his deductive reasoning. We've showed that it started much, much earlier than that in our Roadmap series. Even after, with one example being the radium treatments after Rutherford was released from prison and claimed that he ended up with pneumonia and was almost dying. On the same exact day, he's supposed to be in Brooklyn testifying to his sedition trial. He's out hiking through the woods. He's out hiking through the mountains. If he's so sick that he can't get out of bed, what's hiking through the mountains tell you? Then he shouldn't have been out hiking through the mountains. He wasn't as sick as he claimed to be. Goodrich says that after 26 years, the society conceded that the Abrams machine was but the work of quacks, but still does not know demonism when it sees it. If they should admit this abundantly evident truth, they may fear the embarrassing question, was Judge Rutherford a dupe and user of demonism? And so Goodrich is making the claim that this machine was used for demonism. Yet, newspaper articles, magazine articles, and the quotations from various books that we've shown shows that it was a chiropractic healing machine, or a supposed chiropractic healing machine. Where is Goodrich getting the idea that it was like a Ouija board? What Goodrich does is take a quotation from a Golden Age article and jumps to a conclusion. The Golden Age, number 273, he says, has a quotation here. Dr. Coulson says in his magazine for November 1929, since a time when the memory of man runneth not to the contrary, as might be said in legal parlance, alleged diagnoses have been made by clairvoyant, psychic, or other power by many. Dr. Coulson, in the foregoing excerpt, has set forth a principle which Mr. Goodrich's experiences show to be a fact, namely that while the ERA system is true and genuine, there are fakers and frauds endeavoring to associate themselves with it. Goodrich responds, we submit that here Dr. Work has referred explicitly to what all Bible students know to be demonism, and that our experiences at the Truth Clinic in Jonesboro, Arkansas, were experiences with demonism, clairvoyants, psychics, fakers, and frauds, or demonism. Moreover, what we exposed in the Golden Age was identical with the radio class diagnosis, as it claimed to be called. Thus, long in advance, the Society condemned as demonized fakers and frauds the operators of the radio class device. But we do not classify Dr. Work and Brother Howlett as fakers and frauds. They and many others were honest, generous, and philanthropic persons who became unwilling spirit mediums grossly deceived. The yes and no occult signals of Dr. Lecoq at Jonesboro and of Dr. Work and Dr. Howlett of Bethel are still demonistic and occult, regardless of whether they were received by rubbing a button or an abdomen or a plate. The Society's reprehensible censorship and suppression of all further discussion and exposure of the demonism of ERA and radioclast since March 1930 is apparent. Goodrich makes the claim that Goodrich believed this machine was a demon-possessed machine, yet he doesn't offer any evidence other than his own personal experience. Nobody used it that way. Nobody thought of it that way. Just Goodrich. Every writing of the time period either believed the device could heal or that it was a quack device. It was quack science. He continues, in fairness, to point out its weakness, this ERA article has been reproduced at our own expense, along with the Ouija boards article. Just ask for Ouija boards and you'll... Oh. Goodrich suggests in his article that the science of chiropractic seems to emanate from the most ribaldly atheistic center of demonism. And we saw Goodrich's claims made about the grape cure and the milk diet when he was already way off base. A lot of these chiropractors were Christians, and there's many Christian chiropractors even today. It is not here undertaken to prove any of these statements, but for the sake of the argument, accepting them as fully proven, such proven demon origin would not in the slightest degree preclude God's anointed ones from engaging in the services of those various kind of doctors, nor would such doctors, when consecrated to God, be in the slightest debarred by such demonistic origins. So in other words, Goodrich is saying, believe what I'm telling you, even though I'm not providing you any evidence. Goodrich believed the machine to work. And yet, many of the electric wires and cables, as we saw from the various articles, stated that the machine simply would not work whatsoever. A lot of the wires and cables weren't even connected to anything. And so Goodrich suggests that the machine worked by occult signals. And by occult signals is meant signals not objectively registered upon or by some physical object, instrument, or device, but upon a human organism only, and that subjectively. To illustrate, radio waves of infinitely small intensity may be electrically amplified and converted into audio or sound waves of stentorian proportions. Such objective sound signals are produced every time a radio, which is a physical instrument, is turned on. The existence of the radio signals, unperceivable by human senses, is thus absolutely proven beyond cavil or doubt by physical fact. In this case, sound signals. Even voice reproduction of a speaker known to be far away. But the first receiving set for the claimed broadcast from blood or organisms or from handwriting has yet to give its first wee click which alone could prove here we are, we exist. And so there are those who claim that this was an auto writing machine. Again, Abrams, who created the machine, wasn't claiming it was an auto writer, but that it could diagnose disease, race, gender, and other things just from samples of a person's handwriting. Again, not the demonism Goodrich is claiming. Goodrich makes all these claims, but again, supplies no evidence for what he's suggesting.
The idea that it was that it would vibrate disease, and you could literally shake disease to death. And Abrams made a lot of money on this. And he made the money by selling the machines and leasing them out, basically, so people would have to pay him under the condition that they didn't open the machine and look inside it. And they would see, if they had actually opened the machine and looked inside it, there'd be wires and cables, but a lot of them weren't connected to anything and weren't even conducting any electricity whatsoever. He was called out by this very quickly by the Scientific American Journal with several issues on the subject. There were several newspaper articles that called him a quack, but the chiropractic associations loved it because they were always looking for some kind of alternative treatments. And since Watchtower and Rutherford were into those alternative treatments like radioactive radium, or prescribing alcohol, which probably would not have been good for somebody's health.
When Scientific American had a whole series of articles on this machine, Goodrich claimed that Rutherford said to him, "I would not believe anything published in the Scientific American. That was a judgment expressed before hearing the facts, and hence a shame and a folly to the speaker." Proverbs 18:13. The Scientific American says that the ERAist can apparently diagnose accurately from a blood specimen or the handwriting. Brother Rutherford's approved representative explicitly and implicitly endorses that statement, yet not the rest of the article, which claims that the device never worked because the cables and the electric and the wires inside the machine weren't even connected to make the machine work. Dr. Abrams was making a lot of money selling these machines, but he didn't quite sell them. He was more leasing them. And they were leased under the condition that they were not allowed to be opened, because what would they find if they opened it? The Scientific American Journal opened one up, and this is what they found. And as can be seen, there are multiple articles in the Scientific American Journal in the early 1920s that investigated this machine. Our Abrams investigation, part 1, some preliminary impressions regarding the electronic reactions of Abrams. Part 2, a test to determine the accuracy of the electronic reactions diagnosis. Part 3, comments on our first test and a look ahead to other tests and studies. And our Abrams verdict. The electronic reactions of Abrams and electronic medicine in general found utterly worthless. And again, you can see the machine there. You can see Albert Abrams in the upper left corner. And again, the use of his machine in the lower right corner. Not only did Goodrich believe that the device was related to demonism, he thought other things were related to demonism as well, such as the graces of the Spirit. He says, the idea of the graces of the Spirit is fully as foreign to the Scriptures as the Trinity. In fact, more so, for there is a spurious passage, 1 John 5:7, by which the Trinity can be supported, but there's not even a spurious passage which to support the development of either the graces or the fruits of the Spirit. In the vast majority of the instances, the word grace is used in reference to God's bestowal of love, mercy, kindness, and favor upon men. In a few instances, it refers to the bestowal of thanks and adoration upon God by men, and is translated thanks in several such instances. In fact, the instances where the word for grace is used in the Bible in reference to man's bestowal of love and favor upon his fellows are few and far between, and in no case is such a passage in point for the character development cause. For example, the statement at Luke 2:52 that Jesus increased in wisdom and stature, as well as in favor, charis, grace, with God and man, has never been cited as proof that either God or man was developing character, because they were bestowing more and more favor upon the growing and exemplary young man, Jesus. Unfortunately, our teachers have overpassed this true and scriptural meaning of this inspired word charis, translated grace. This is quite easy to do since our English word grace has so many meanings which the Greek word does not have. Webster lists no less than 11 different meanings, 10 in addition to its primary meaning of the exercise of love or the bestowal of favor. The fifth meaning listed is beauty, loveliness, elegance of manners. The sixth is a plural and is from mythology or demonism. It refers to the three graces, the demon goddesses who are regarded as the inspirers of the qualities which give attractiveness to wisdom, love, and social intercourse. Since the qualities in contradistinction to the course of action, which supposedly give attractiveness to wisdom, love, and social intercourse, makes an excellent definition for character development as taught in the modern Christian circles. The demon origin of the doctrine is at once transparent. Every article or pamphlet that was ever written on the fruits and graces of the Spirit, and every discourse ever heard on the subject, was based on the anti-scriptural fifth meaning and the demonology of the sixth. Beauty, loveliness, elegance of manners, and the supposed plural graces of the Spirit from demonology and not the Bible constitute the entire basis of the character development teaching. Goodrich also thought the Antichrist was just Satan himself. He says in one of his articles, as far back as the 1960s and since, we have often referred to Satan as the Antichrist. But not until the fall of 1974 did we publish a short one-page brochure giving the scriptural proof of this fact. This subject and its scriptural amplification will need a complete article for its adequate presentation. But anyone who denies the scriptural authority, briefly stated below, will be setting forth his own opinion in contradiction to the Word of God. He was very strong with his words, as strong as Rutherford was, and Knorr and some of the other Watchtower writers. Goodrich thought both Trinity and Christmas were pagan in origin, just like Watchtower, after the Rutherford years. In a letter to Goodrich, one of the writers says, further, I could never thank you enough for the 2 tracts. I must truthfully say that I could never have begun to write them. What marvelous works! Never have I heard or read of the tongues being explained like that. I've read so much from people who attempt to explain why Christmas is wrong, but none can approach your real reasons as to why. The Watchtower merely sniffed the air or rippled the water beside your article. Now I am fortified with why tongues and Christmas are forms of blasphemy. Mr. Roy, truly God must send some angels to encamp around you, or Satan would never let you get by. But every so often, in going through Goodrich's magazine, there's some historical tidbits that are quite fascinating. We had our discussion on the blood transfusion doctrine and some of the anti-Semitic reasoning which Watchtower used to support that. But that doctrine did not come into effect until the Knorr period. And one of the letters written to Goodrich and published in his magazine goes as far to suggest that the blood transfusion doctrine was suggested by Rutherford himself. The letter says, there is a woman, a JW, in the hospital who refuses to take a transfusion, even though she is dying. Macmillan, in his book, tells of the boys in prison during World War II who refused to be vaccinated until he made them, quote, see the light, unquote. If I remember correctly, it was in 1940 that JFR first brought this up at the Bethel table. But it was not until 1945 that there was anything in the Watchtower about it. In 1937, John Bogard was our unit servant, and he appealed for volunteers to go to the Marine Hospital on Staten Island and give a brother some blood. It turned out that that transfusion was not needed. What about those who gave or received blood from 1940 to 1945 and did not know that JFR condemned blood transfusion? 2 years before that, he condemned pre-Armageddon marriages. And Goodrich responded to the letter by stating, it did not take too long for untheocratic vaccination to become theocratic when it suited the theocrats to have their vassals comply, so that passports could be secured for them and they could go everywhere, opening up theocratic branches of the New World Society in all nations. If blood transfusions were to become a requirement for securing passports, how long would it take for the Brooklyn theocrats to see the light?
So we've spent a lot of time going through all of this documentation and all of this evidence showing these anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that Rutherford literally incorporated into his Watchtower organization. He built an entire religion, as we've said, out of those anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. And then even controlled Watchtower members by giving them medical advice, also associated with anti-Semites, that would not have been a healthy choice for them, that would have ended up disastrous. That
And did.
literally has caused deaths. As we've shown, Watchtower is a religion Rutherford created out of two types of conspiracy theories: anti-Semitic conspiracies and these medical quack conspiracies. And those who questioned or opposed Watchtower were disfellowshipped and forced out, or they simply just gave up and left. And everyone else that Rutherford brought into the organization, through his radio lectures, through the phonograph records, through the pamphlets and booklets and tracts that he was publishing, they were already prone to those ideas because they've been hearing them on the radio from other people or reading them in the paper like Ford or Coughlin. That was the zeitgeist of the time, and Rutherford's bought into it and popularizing it because he believed it too, because he had those ideas all the way back when he was in the Populist Party. And William Jennings Bryan has tied up in all of it again in both the anti-Semitic stuff with the Populist Party. He himself may not have been anti-Semitic, but the Populist Party was. And Bryan's involved in these medical quackery concepts as well.
And if that's not enough, we have some more information to share in the future concerning a little more touching on Bryan and doing a summary of this, how a complete tie-in throughout this 23, 24, I can't lost count of it now, segments of the series. We hope, you got something out of it. From the comments we're getting, a lot of people are saying now they see it like we did. We did the exact same thing. When we saw it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah,
and every picture, every writing, every quote, every phrase is a dog whistle for what all this is. And if you could show people this is a non-apostate viewpoint, we're just showing history. We're not condemning. We're not taking the side of it by any means, but we're putting out a fact. And if Watchtower or anyone else can really rebut it, we've got all kinds of references, where it came from. Again, as I said before, many of them, most of them, a lot of them, Watchtower sources themselves. Historical, their Watchtower court cases, their Watchtower publications. So this is where it came from. Hopefully, if you've been educated by it, we hope you can share it with others so that they could educate by it. And this way, people have an alternative viewpoint instead of just being taken down a path. It's like I've always said, if you take someone who doesn't understand or have any Bible knowledge and put watchtowers in front of them and study with them and lead them down a path, you can indoctrinate them into that religion. But now if you take that same person who's listening to Jeff or Paul, oh, okay, wait, no, this is, and they won't become a Jehovah Witness. And while we're not trying to prevent per se people from becoming Jehovah's Witness, that's your right if you want to do that. But here's the other side that they're not showing.
And as you said, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you know what to look for, then when you start looking at the old literature again, you start to see it everywhere. And as we stated in our previous episode of the roadmap, our previous discussion, this link, this association with the blood transfusion doctrine and anti-Semitic conspiracy theory as the foundation that was repeated multiple times in the Watchtower, we didn't find that. That was found by one of our viewers, Larchwood from Twitter. And some of these ideas that we just talked about regarding the medical quackery and the conspiracy theories there, that was found by another viewer. And the link to the hotel and all of that, another viewer who's Pimo, who just recently woke up, contacted us and told us what they had found. And we were so impressed with it that we've included that information here. And yet, there's more to come. We still have more to follow on this roadmap to the very end.
Including the leak I made earlier in the discussion.
And so they suggested ideas, they made connections that we didn't make.
Well, it's like buying a car, a used car. Okay, here's the car, it runs, but leaving out, okay, there was a car accident, the transmission had to be rebuilt, it was in a flood. Okay, which is why people have Carfax today.
Yeah.
Try and report some of these things if they can within a reasonable amount of time. It's not always what Watchtower tells you, it's what they don't tell you. And that I guess if we had any goal of what we're trying to get through here, it's that. We're trying to show here's this other side of information. If you want to become a Jehovah Witness, go ahead. We don't care. We care, but it's your life, your decision. But here, use this as part of your research, as part of your foundation roadmap to get through to your journey to see where you are. And again, as we said before, if you leave, don't join another organization that follows that same path where you think you found something so marvelous and wonderful. Well, wait, you didn't research the first one. So you don't make the same mistake twice. Research, find out before you make an opinion. Don't just take, oh, the internet says this. Jeff and I, mostly Jeff, has traced a lot of these sources. They come to dead ends with, and I don't want to mention any names for liability or any reasons like that. They come to dead ends where, wait, here's a person who just made that statement. Where did that come from? And that's what a lot of people literally follow after they leave Watchtower. And we hope we can spare you from that. You just left one and went into another, but you're sure of this new one, just as you were sure of going out in service and preaching and saving everyone else. It's the same fervor. Don't make the same mistake twice.
What more can be said?
Not only will we look at the Abrams machine, but we will also talk about another anti-Semitic group that was influenced by Judge Rutherford and the Jehovah's Witnesses.